For those of y'all that are involved, tonight, practice, 5 o'clock, right here. Message this morning. Are you ready for Christmas? And most of us tend to think, what have we done to get ready? Are your Christmas decorations up? Is the tree decorated? Are the ornaments hung? Have you done all of your Christmas shopping? Have you waited in line? Were you there for Black Friday and all those other sort of things? We're not mailing Christmas cards here, but have you got them ready? Have you made them? Have you filled them out? On your calendar, all those places that you're supposed to go, people you're supposed to see, things to do, have you got all that stuff done? Are you ready? Lots of times we kind of meet ourselves coming and going this time of year, the midst of the Christmas rush. It gets hectic. And why? Because a lot of the time we forget exactly what's happening this time of year. There's a story about a little girl, and she watched her mom and dad getting ready for Christmas. All the decorations and doing all that, and the burdens and the bundles and the parties and the presents, and she felt kind of left out. And it seemed to her, what she heard most was, would you please step out of the way? They just didn't have time for her. So one night in the month of December, she got next to her bed and she prayed. And she says, Our Father who art in heaven, please forgive us our Christmases as we forgive those who Christmas against us. And the sad thing is that happens sometimes. Are you ready for Christmas? It's about more than the activities and about what about your attitude? Some people, I'm sure you've heard somebody say, I just can't get into the Christmas spirit this year. Maybe you probably have said it. Christmas says God became a human being and expressed his love for us by living among us, walking with us, talking with us, toiling with us, and eventually dying for us. Let's turn our attention to the Christmas story and look at Matthew chapter 1, and we're looking at verses 18 through 25. Matthew 1, 18 to 25. Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, and he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and he took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. That story, we hear it again in Luke, and it's one that a lot of us are familiar with. let's look just a little bit deeper with this. You know, Joseph, he wasn't in the spotlight for very long. And we really don't know a whole lot specific about Joseph. But some of what we do know will teach us about some of his attitudes. And that can make Christmas more real in our lives as well. First, we need to learn to accept God's will. Be ready to accept God's will no matter what it is. And Joseph was open to the will and the leading of God. Kind of put yourself in his position for a minute. He had his life planned. He was pledged to be married. The process was a little different back then. You got betrothed and promised, pledged, and you were actually in some ways considered already married. You were betrothed, even though the ceremony itself hadn't taken place and you hadn't joined with each other. So the wedding ceremony, the plans were there, it was going to be happening, and he wanted to marry, he wanted to settle in Nazareth, and he would continue his carpentry business. But then Mary comes up and says, "Hey, I'm expecting a baby." Well, think about this from Joseph's standpoint. She comes to him and says, "I'm with a child." What would we do nowadays? Well, it wasn't me. I haven't joined with you, so she's cheated on me. That's not a big leap. What in the heck's going on? And he loved her dearly. But that had to have really, what's the phrase? Rocked his world, but not in a good way. He thought Mary loved him, but now it looks like she's been unfaithful. So the bond should have been broken there. Actually, according to the law back then, because the ceremony hadn't taken place, according to the law, you know what should have happened? Mary should have been stoned. Pretty severe. But Joseph loved her so much, he did not want to shame her. He didn't want that to happen to her. So he wanted to divorce her quietly and save her the humiliation and the punishment under the law. And as he's thinking about that, Joseph had an angel come to him in a dream. And the angel says, "Trust God. You don't understand everything that's happening, but if you trust him, everything will be all right." That's a leap of faith and trust there, and a pretty stiff one. Joseph had to have been a man of faith to have taken that in. And it's hard to live by faith sometimes. Think about that. Here's this woman that comes to you and says, "I'm pregnant," and it's not you. Sometimes it's easy when God is blessing you. It's easy to have faith. It's when the road gets rough that it gets, and things aren't happening the way you expect them to. That's when it gets hard. And Joseph had to have had a lot of questions, but he continued in faith. Christmas comes to us, hopefully, as a time of love. Right now, in this day and age, it's tough. We see so much hatred out there. And Joseph had to have cried out, "God, how can this be?" But like him, if we listen, we can hear that still small voice from God that says, "I'm in control. Trust me. Trust me." Paul wrote, and this is Romans 8:28. we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His purpose. Christmas happened in part because Joseph trusted God. Second this morning, learn to care. You care about other people. Joseph's assignment seems pretty simple. You know, when we do the plays and when you see the nativities and everything, well, we look at that and here come the excited shepherds. They've made this long, long trip. And then you see these fancy, expensive gifts, the gold and the frankincense and the myrrh. And Mary is there, and you see her looking over the baby Jesus and him glowing. And where do we normally see Joseph in there? He's off to the side, standing there. Sometimes it seems like, to me, the donkey and the camel have a more prominent place in the nativity than Joseph does. It's not a starring role. And what's his task? Take care of Mary and the baby Jesus. He had the role of caring for the needs of others. You know, the finest descriptive title that we can get as a church family out in the community, whoever is describing White Oak, would be, this is a church that really cares. There is no greater compliment. You know, there's another short story. A young couple with an 18-month-old son. And they go to spend a few days with the grandparents. And Christmas that year fell on a Sunday. And the father needed to be back at work on Monday. So right after going to church that morning, they said their goodbyes and they left for home. And there was a bit of a drive there. And there weren't a whole lot of filling stations open. So they pulled into a truck stop that just happened to be open that day. And they stopped and they were going to fuel up and get a little something to eat. And it was a little, what my wife would call, on the sketchy side. Wasn't bright and clean. It was a truck stop. And they sat down and they began to eat. And they thought they were the only customers in there, but their little 18-month son said, "Hey there, hey there." And he was putting together two words, "hi there," and trying to make it into one. "Hey there, hey there." And there was a response every time he said that from a table that was in an alcove next to the door. "Well, hello there, little boy. Hi there." And they looked and they saw this old, ragged, tattered-looking man. And his clothes were torn up and beat up. His shoes actually had some of his toes sticking out. They were so worn. And he was unshaven. And when he smiled, they noticed he didn't even have any teeth. It's an older gentleman, and life had been rough to him. But for some reason, their little 18-month-old just couldn't help reaching out to him and kept on and on. "Hi there, hi there." And the old man kept answering. And finally the man says, "Little boy, do you know how to do patty cake?" And sure enough, he started doing patty cake in the air. "Well, what about peekaboo? Do you know how to do that?" And the little boy started playing peekaboo. And they played for a little while, and for some reason, from that little boy and that old man, there was an instant chemistry and bond. And the parents were, he's dirty, he's not dressed well, and they're, "Let's just finish the food and get out of here. I'll pay, and you grab our little son and get out the door quick." And they were hoping just to get out. But as they passed the old man there in the doorway, Eric reached out, the little son Eric reached out both of his arms and ran towards the old man. And he looked up at the parents and said, "Do you mind if I hold your son?" And at this point, the mom really didn't have any choice because the little boy was jumping into the old man's arm. It was past the point of really refusing. And the man cradled him and patted his back, and the young boy had his arms around his neck. And the old man just talked to him, and they noticed tears were streaming down his face. And he looked up and he said, "Mom, you take good care of this boy." And she says, "I will. Thank you so very much. You've given me the greatest Christmas present I could have had today." Sometimes reaching out and caring about somebody, in fact, a lot of the time, it means a whole lot more than the fancy electronics or the bright, shiny toy or whatever else shows up. Christmas came because, at least in part, Joseph cared about Mary and Jesus. And third, we need to learn to give. And it's not always something physical, just like this young man did. He hugged on that man. He showed him some love and some care. Joseph didn't know that when Jesus was born, he would wind up having to take Jesus and Mary into Egypt. He didn't know that he was going to be separated from his hometown and his loved ones for a long period of time. He didn't know the demands that were going to be made on his time and his pocketbook. But he gave. That's what Christmas is, isn't it? God didn't have to do that. There's nothing wrong with giving gifts. Nothing wrong at all. But the greatest gift that we can give is the gift of love and care. Sometimes, well, it just doesn't make sense here, but there's another story. I'm full of them this morning. There was a play that was going on, and you would recognize the play. And the young man was playing the part of the innkeeper in the nativity scene. And he had lines to read, "I don't have any room at the inn. There's no room. There's no place to stay." And Joseph and Mary, the parts that were being played there, "I don't have any place to go. Fixing to have a baby. You've got to let me in." And the young man was looking at the people, the innkeeper was looking at who was playing Joseph and Mary, and it began to hit him. How do I turn them away? How could an innkeeper back then have turned them away? And finally, the prompter up front, "Say your line, say your line, be gone, say your line." And he stopped, and finally, he said, wait a minute, you can have my room." Well, the spirit was right. It kind of threw the play in a bit of a quandary, but the spirit was right. I can't turn these people away. You can have my room. And God, in sending Jesus, said, "You can have my life." Because that's what he gave. He gave his son and his son's life. Are you ready for Christmas? I don't know if you're going to get all your shopping done in time or not. or if the shipping delays are going to keep everything from coming. I don't know if you're going to make it to all the events and things that you had planned. But I hope that through it all, you can remember the attitude. Are you ready for the real spirit of Christmas to come? If you've got that, the Christmas will be as great as it possibly could be.
Let's turn to hymn 319. Hymn 319. Let's all stand together.